In the beginning, there was Double Dragon. It was a modest little game that was fast-paced and replicated the smooth controls of its arcade counterpart. In this game, you had to work your way up at heart level to get more moves, like the uppercut, the headbutt, the jump kick, and even a ground and pound attack that would never appear again in any future games of the series. Like any game, there were tricky parts, and while some of them might have been too difficult for console gamers, there was nothing in it that couldn't be overcome by a roll of quarters in the arcade. There was a two-player mode, but it was non-simultaneous, putting the second player on the same solo quest as the first. There was, however, a compensating feature in the two-player B mode. It was a versus mode against either a computer or human player, and while the players could only fight against like characters, it was still a big feature that was unique to this game of the series and predated the Street Fighter II craze that would make this form of gameplay popular. And then, there was Double Dragon 2. The Revenge. Don't let the laid-back tone of this intro fool you. To put it quite simply, this game was the shit. There were tricks and traps, whips and bats, dynamite sticks and high-spinning kicks, ninjas and clones, and knives you could throw. There were great big bullies and spike-loaded pulleys. There were choppers with guns, and foot sweeps were fun, high doors and breakaway floors, contraption-loaded machines, fade-outs and cutscenes, flying knees, guys way bigger than me, firecracker grenades, and deadly falls. Christ, this game, it had it all. Even the two-player mode was simultaneous this time, meaning you could join forces with a good friend and tackle this adventure together. How incredibly awesome is that? And you had all the moves available from the start. You didn't have to save up parts to get them like before. And then, as if the saga of Billy and Jimmy Lee couldn't get any better, along came the third installment of the series. It was to be the Double Dragon game that outdid all Double Dragon games, the trilogy to end all trilogies, in the true spirit of making each successive follow-up to a video game franchise that much better than the one preceding it. In came the legendary, the immortal Double Dragon 3. Look at that. Even the introduction to the game exudes triumphantness, a sense of majesty and immortality, what with the depth of tone and those beautiful, wonderful, shining pillars and all. Oh, the wonder, the superiority, oh, I can feel it now. But there's only one problem.
This game is fucking horrible! It's fucking horrible!
That's right, angry Nintendo nerd, this game is fucking horrible. And you know, it's not so much that this game is among some of the most horrible games on the system, because it's really not. It's more that this game is just a flat-out disgrace to the Double Dragon games that came before it. And in this video, I'm going to explore exactly why. We start out with the storyline. Now in the first Double Dragon, it's a pretty basic plot. We actually see as soon as we press start how some goons walk up and punch Billy's girlfriend, and the rest of the adventure is spent fighting to get that girl Marion back. Alright, simple enough. Now in the next Double Dragon, we're greeted with a prologue that actually sets us specifically in New York City after a nuclear war has taken place and a bunch of crime syndicates have emerged out of the ashes. In this story, Billy and Jimmy Lee were both volunteers who took it upon themselves to actively fight against the leaders of these syndicates, and as a result of their ambition, the girlfriend, Marion, was killed. Whoa, that's some heavy emotional stuff right there. It's a revenge story. And the game makers actually drew it out for us with a distinctive comic book style before propelling us forward into the game. I mean, how could you not feel compelled to just rush right out and kick some serious ass? But how does it compare to the third installment of the series? Well, if you beat in the second game, you'd know that Marion comes back to life in the end. But now, in this one, it appears that the girl has vanished? Okay, apparently this chick has some real commitment issues with Billy. Either that, or they're just repeating the same kidnapping plot of the first game. But anyways, so now this person named Haruko shows up, and you could tell she has some really bad motives. She, he, it, shit, whatever. But anyways, so now she says she knows who took Marion, and that we need to get 3 sacred stones of power for them in order for them to release her. Man, this old bag sure knows a lot about the bad guys for someone who claims to be on our side. Gee, I wonder how that's going to play out. Anyways, let's pretend we don't know and press on. So we start out in Billy's dojo, where our student, Brett, has gotten pretty badly beaten by just one of the single weakest enemy in the game. He says, "They're great fighters, but the one you must fear the most is... Damn it, man, tell me now! Damn it, man, I must know!" But of course, he has to die before telling us. God, what's wrong with these people? It's just like all those generic Hollywood action movies or those old Walker, Texas Ranger episodes where the guy's dying and he's got some important piece of information to tell you, but instead of spitting it out with his last dying breath, he gets killed by a sniper before he can say anything because he wasted all his energy telling you about the mere fact that he had something to say in the first place. What the hell? Now I have to go through with the stupid mission. Yeah, thanks a lot, Brett. Good riddance. So we get outside and we realize one significant drawback to this game right off the bat. The controls are fucking stiff. I mean, granted, the ease of controls from Double Dragon 1 to 2 were already a little bit on the decline since the first one was replicating an arcade game and the second one wasn't. But in this one, it's fucking horrendous. It kind of reminds me of another popularly overrated video game with notoriously stiff controls. It's called Final Fight, where it brings you to a complete standstill every time you throw a freaking punch. Not cool. In this game, you have to be perfectly clear with every button you press, otherwise you'll wind up getting nothing. That being said, there are a couple of good strategies to remember to get you out of jams in this game. One of them is to remember that when you're sandwiched between people, the best way to get out of it is to jump towards somebody and press A instead of pressing B to do a jump kick. This will trigger a flip over move that will fling one opponent way the hell away from you and do a shitload of damage on them. When that doesn't work, try a technique that I've perfected called the backwards jump kick. They can't hit you when you move vertically like they can when you jump directly at them. So move up a bit, jump out towards one person, and instead of pressing B to kick right away, turn around in midair first, then press B and kick your opponent in the back in the same direction that you came from. Abuse the fuck out of this move, all throughout the game. This is easier than doing a cyclone spin kick, though if you can manage to do the spin kick when you first meet up with enemies, by all means do it, because the enemies in this game will always fall for it. Unlike in Double Dragon 2, where the enemies would always duck any obvious jumping moves, and you'd have to press the punch button right as you're kneeling down after the jump in order to recover with the devastating uppercut. That's the one ray of sunlight in a game with otherwise horrid play control. Another big complaint about this game is that you only get one life. Well, there's really no excuse for that, but there is some rationale. In Double Dragon 2, you got a shitload of lives, and the reason was because there was a shitload of levels, 10 missions to be exact. In Double Dragon 3, there's only 5 levels, and in Double Dragon 2, each of those levels had more parts. For example, let's take the first level. How many parts? Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 including the boss. And in the first level of Double Dragon 3, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 including the boss. So I guess instead of being more creative and expanding both the level and enemy variety in this game, the makers decided, let's just cut it all short and give them only one life. Fair is fair. Yeah, well, things might be fair, but that still doesn't erase the fact that it's still total bullshit to have just one life in a freaking video game. You see, when you're making a video game, you want to make as much variety as possible for the players. Sure, the game's really about fighting, but they want to fight in as much situations and as much locations as possible. That's one of the things that makes great games, much like Double Dragon 2. But in Double Dragon 3, what you get is the exact polar opposite of gaming variety. For example, let's look at the second level of the game in China. This is the first part of that level. Just watch it for a little bit. Okay, now let's fast forward to the next level in Japan. Here's the first part of that level. Notice anything similar about it? Okay, now let's go back to the first level. Now let's fast forward again in the game to the Italy level. Noticing a trend yet? Do you get it? They're all the same. That's right, all the levels in this game are exactly the same. There's no difference. It's just the same old repetitive fighting in a wide open area, only with a different backdrop for each environment. But there's no actual difference in the physical layout of the levels. And when you move on in the levels, the only place to go is inside. Oh wow, big whoop. Now I get to fight in a big open space enclosed by 4 walls. How creative. Like the writers of the game couldn't come up with anything more interesting than going from internal to external on a Hollywood screenplay. And the worst part about it is that because there are fewer and non-distinct parts in the levels, the game doesn't actually force me to move on and use the entire screen space. So if I wanted to, I could just let all the enemies come at me and fight them all off right here on the same screen. I mean, sure, I could move on myself, but in order to do that, I'd have to actually make a substantial effort to run over there in the first place and draw the enemies over there with me. But why? Is there anything over there worth seeing? No! So why would I do it? Just to bounce off a fucking wall every so often? It's fucking ridiculous. Now, looking back on it, it is kinda easy to see what the game makers were going for by making it this way. In Double Dragon 2, you only had to face like 3 to 4 enemies in each part of the level to get to the next part. Here's how a typical part of those levels would go. Pretty easy, right? In fact, it was so easy that basically all the real difficulty in this game lied in the later 3 missions, where the instant death hazards of the level became the more important concern that we needed all the extra lives for. So in Double Dragon 3, you can see how they were trying to make it more realistic by cutting out all those parts of the levels and having all the bad guys just run onto the screen, one after the other, like they might do in real life. But the problem is that while they achieved their goal of making the per-level difficulty of the game go up, the very identity of the levels went way the fuck down and ended up being a true blasphemy to the way in which the first 2 games were designed. Now, if it was simple combat difficulty and realism that they were after, then they could have designed it just like Double Dragon 1 and 2, but instead incorporated these 4 suggestions. 1. Make the levels longer. 2. Keep the instant death hazards moderate and balanced from level to level. And this is my favorite. 3. Require players to move on to each part of the level themselves after they've defeated a minimum and undisclosed amount of bad guys per part, and have unlimited enemies run into the same part of the screen afterwards until they actually do move on. Think about how that would have played out. And of course 4, compensate the increased difficulty factor with more lives and with possible ways of earning extra men. All 4 of these things would have helped create a much better follow-up to the Double Dragon series and a far superior game to the enormous crapload that is Double Dragon 3. But let's get back to the shitty story. In China, you meet this guy named Chen, who's the boss of that level. Now when he comes out, he claims to be the brother of the guy that we killed in the battle with the Shadow Warriors of the previous game. But the only guy that we really killed was the last boss. The other guys just kind of came and went in arbitrary numbers. So I ask you, does this guy look anything like this guy, the final boss of the Double Dragon 2 game? I don't think so. So the only Chen we know from previous games is a dude from the first Double Dragon. So maybe we're looking for someone like him? Is it this guy, the foot sweep dude with the swords? He kind of looks like him a little bit. Or maybe it was these guys, the flipping ninja fucks. How about these guys? Who was it? I don't know. We don't know. Oh well, screw this Brady bunch of bad guys. Back to the story. So the guy joins you, and before long you realize that he stinks. His ultra cool looking multiple kick move is even harder to pull off than Billy's spin kicks. Even harder, try keeping your cool with a bunch of Japanese ninjas swarming frantically around you. It's fucking nuts. Also, it has recently been brought to my attention that some people consider Chen to be the best guy in the game simply because it only takes one full combo of his punch move to kill most enemies and get you through the game quicker. But there's a couple of problems with that. First off, punching in general in this game is a bad idea. Punch combos usually take so long to put together that by the time you actually get into it, the enemy sandwiches you and you have to stop and walk around them just to try it all over again. Secondly, since the controls of this game are so fucking stiff in the first place, you have to be right on the money with each punch or the computer will interrupt the combo and give you shit. Unless you're using a turbo controller, it's simply not worth the risk. And with Chen, his punch move is so awkward and so weird looking that getting the timing just down is a royal nightmare. I mean, what is this stupid thing? It's like some special crotch grabber move that's designed for the sole purpose of pulling your dick off. And with Chen's height, I wouldn't doubt that he could actually do it. Do you really want to constantly jam your hands into the A button all throughout this game just to do this piece of crap? I'd rather watch a monkey poop out a long string of dog shit and then stand patiently by while it sprouts into a beanstalk of bullfuck before I do this move. What? You actually thought I would show that to you? You perverts!